Kaya yung sa tini, takat Johan. Jakuk sawe Johan, achtuya ke wuchin khasati. Ya kwal nasketihin aya o yech we wush kanach wututa ati. Aka awe gachtulsa tauk. Oh, wucha we tina. Tata. Ha, tadachnach awe Johan yak. Achawe we tina. Clash awasku yak e ha ti. Ye awa achtuya ke yagi. We yel kakanch kalniki kataka kwal chidechi a dati chikachtuni kaguksa owe ohan kagudaksa gudesa ye awa yatayach achtoasagu datush which in you kagachtila ati kadata tinachsa yeti tachat khanaiwus kakakwa aki dekakwa tashi gunchish. It's great to see everybody. We are going to, no matter where you are, I'm glad that we're together. We're going to work today on some direction, location stuff, the Raven and Fire story. Might take a look at Ţaukha so that we have another example of, like, I want to show you how some of the parts work when you sort of blow them up. And I think Ṭaukha is a really good story to look at with that. But we only have 3 classes left. So we might do Ṭaukha in the super class. That might be a good idea. Because then we could do sort of a slow walkthrough. And then anything you need help with, just let me know. So even though you're translating over the next couple of weeks a story that's probably a significant chunk of language, don't stress out. Because if you're stuck on anything, it's totally fine. We're going to go over that stuff together, take a look at it. There might be things where we're all a little confused and trying to figure out what's going on. Speaking of confused, like I thought we were meeting till the December, what did I say? December. It's like, let's just go forever. But I think we are done on December 7th. So it's not enough time for me, but that's okay. Everybody needs a break. I hope you all get rest. But we will be talking, especially in our final class and in the super class, about ways we can all stay connected, keep working with each other if we want to. And if you have any questions, just bring them here, send them to me in between classes, whatever works for you. So anything you folks were wondering about or thinking about before we move back into direction and location? We're going to shift a little bit towards place names and seeing how they work in place names.
Last week, I heard you use the phrase Yahweh one name, and I've heard, sorry, I'm eating right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard other versions where it's something like Yequati or Yequati, and I was wondering what it actually is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Good question. Let's take a look at something. So let me type this up for you folks. And I want to show you folks a thing here. So we'll look at this. So this is a verb list, the verb database. And this is under the verb root ne, which actually there's a couple of them. So this verb database is fabulous. There are a couple things that I would probably recommend adjusting, and one of them would be separating some of the verb roots that I think are actually multiple roots that are in there. I don't think the working or happening verb is the same as the handling verb. But if we scroll down, we do have this verb for ready or finished or permanent. It's one of the last, well, it's kind of towards the middle, I guess. And so if you see this, you'll see yun uwane. So a couple things to sort of keep in mind, right? Because it is a 0 verb, so this here in parentheses shows us the conjugation type or the conjugation prefix. You can say either one. There's 0, na, ga, and qa. That's going to tell us a bunch of stuff about the verb. The big thing here is when we look at a perfective, because it's 0, you're going to end up with uwa as opposed to wu. You're also going to end up with a high stem instead of a low stem. So that you're going to get yun, uwa, ne as a high tone. So this is the verb that a lot of folks, people use it on a regular basis. And so let me show you, what am I looking? Sorry. I have leftover strange notes from previous classes. So I'll show you what I was looking at here a little bit later. So the way a lot of folks, I think, hear this verb is if you're involved with a dance group, perhaps, there's a bit of a script that dance groups use. And then we're going to go over this script right now so I could show you how it works. Let me get this ready. So this yun part, it pops up in front of a verb, and it usually refers to completion, right? So you can add this to a lot of different verbs. So I could say ḥukaháa, I ate it, and I could say yun ḥukaháa, which would be I ate it all, right? Or I finished eating. It could be either one. So this part means finished or to completion. Then you're going to get ge, or if you're in Tessin, you'll say gi. And then if you said, we'll just use ge for now. You can switch it to gi for Tessin. So let me do this. So if I said yun uwane, we just looked it up, and it means it is ready or they are ready. Hold on, what's going on? So if that's the case, where this is meaning they are ready or it is ready, what do you think changes if I put ge in there?
Are they? Or is it?
Is it ready? Are they ready? Right? So this can be an it or a they, a singular they, a third person. And so you could be referring to, like maybe people are setting up for something and you're asking, is it ready? Is the thing prepared? Right? And so going back to this list, so go back to here. What we see here is an object pronoun. It means there's this list of object pronouns to pick from. So going back, let's see, how do I want to do this? Hold on. Maybe, let me stop share for a second. Let's set this monitor up right. Okay. Oops. Oh. So let's do, so we're going to grab a graphic, and then I'm going to put the graphic onto here. So if we know that this can take an object pronoun, right? So then let's also insert something else here. So if we saw that capital O, that means we can pick from this list. Khat, ha, I, yi. This one is what we see. It's the 0 marker. Ka, ut, and the sh. So if we go up here, how would I change this now to say, as a statement, you are ready?
E-U-N-A?
Yes. Yun, iwane. So this is not said very often. You are ready. And I could also say, what about yun, yi, uwane?
You plural are ready.
You all are ready. So with that, how would I say, are you ready? Yenge iwane, right? Are you ready? So we're seeing like the use of this ge. We're also seeing how this object pronoun is changing. So like let's say you're waiting for me, right? You're waiting for me for class. You start texting me, "Hane, yenge iwane." Like, but or I get, we'll do the affirmative answer here in a second. So then, same thing. How would I say, are you all ready?
Yenge iwane.
Yenge iwane. In this case, you usually get what should be that? Yenge iwane. I think.
If you're typing it out, I don't see it on the screen yet. It's still the
Oh, is it?
last one.
Hold on. Blah. But yes, I am an all-star today. And then, I usually hear this one, Yenge yi wune. Yenge yi wune. I think most people say it like that. Oh, well. So are you all ready? So now we got questions, right? So statement, question, statement, question, statement, question. So the last one, we're not going to ask these ones. I'm going to say, I am ready. I am ready.
Yankwane.
Yeah, well, we're going to grab it from here, though, right there.
Yankat.
Yep. Yuck, A. Let's say that. Okay. Yan khat uwane. I am ready. And the last one, we are ready. Yanha uwane. We are ready. So this comes back to here, like yanha uwane, right? And I could ask that too. Like say we're getting ready to start a class and I was somehow on time. And then we're sort of sitting around. So I'm going to hit this record button. I might say, Yenge hawane, are we ready? And I just think, Yenge hawane. There's a little bit, I sure hear a little bit of flexibility between these. And I don't know, I'd have to listen to some speakers a little bit more and see. Like, I would expect it to be uwane. And so maybe I'm just making a mistake. But coming back to why this was brought up.
I've definitely heard some Angoon groups or people from Angoon say wune. Yenge wune.
Hear them say wune. So like a lot of times when a dance group is getting ready, there's this thing, it's like a script that they do to get themselves ready, right? Because you're gonna go dance in front of people. Sometimes you gotta get each other like really hyped up. Like you gotta lift each other up before you go. We got these pep songs too, right? And these pep songs are sometimes like we're gonna go on this long trip. Let's sing this song, get ourselves fired up. Or we gotta go fight these guys, so let's get fired up so we can go do that. So a lot of times you'll have a dance group leader, and this is how I hear them say it. They'll say, Yenge are you all ready? And then usually folks are saying, like all as a group. And you gotta say, you gotta be on time. Don't be waiting around. You gotta answer that question. And then they'll say, Yi, Gu I, Yach Kwan. Have strength and courage, be brave, right? So this is, I'll put this in like a, can't do it. There. This is the group. This is the group leader. So then the group yells out in some form. I've heard groups will go, Yekwati! And I've heard other groups that go, Yekwati! Right? So they have their own cadence and the way that they do this. But this is saying, y'all ready? Yes. Be brave. It will be. And then boom, the song starts. So this is something that's very common. A lot of dance groups use this. There's other scripts that you could develop from here. You could say Yanhawune. You could say stuff like that. But yeah, so that's kind of how that phrase is used. Dzéiwsh for asking about it. Okay. Any other questions?
I had a question about that ge. Can it go after the verb or does it always go after the preverb?
It goes after whatever it's asking about. So, like whatever the focus of the question is, it should come right after that thing. So it kind of depends. So like, for example, you could say, Ach, eat, yan, uwa, ha. So in this, can anybody translate that for me? Ach, eat, yan, uwa, ha.
I am hungry.
All right, so we got, I am hungry. The way that this works is this verb uwaha. So here's this uwa again. So we should know, like this is some kind of one of those zero things. This means for something to arrive without anybody noticing it, right? So like it just arrives. The root of the verb is sort of like moving without being noticed or moving invisibly, disappearing, stuff like that. Yan is a noun for hunger. Ach, eat. This is one of these empty base things. To me. Hunger has arrived to me. So this is one, if you're going to turn it into a question, I would put it right here. Or I wouldn't ask about myself because that would be, am I hungry? Right, which maybe, I don't know. But this would be, are you hungry? And so then there's other areas where I would say like, ituwu yanik. This is one where I'd have to check with speakers. If I would probably put it right there. Ituwu yanik. But if it was just the verb, I would say it like that. Yanik again. It's usually going to be again if it doesn't end with a vowel, the word before it. The word before it ends with a vowel, then it'll usually just be ge. So yeah, that's one. I'll have to, I'll put together some examples so that we can see it. But I know it's pretty common for learners to just sort of throw it at the end, right? So you got this thing and they just say ge. But like ituwasagu ge, hin ituwasagu ge. That's one where like, I think the preferred way would be either hin ge ituwasagu or hin ituwagesigu. It could go either way with that one. I've heard of both. That's a good question. Okay. Anything else?
Huna, you said that when we do our translations, we'll talk about that later because you helped me with one, and there's another one where I just can't find, and I would love to like look at how you find, like what are the different ways you look for that word, and I don't know if that's a possibility. You're going to do that later, right?
Yeah, you want to
Or
do it maybe after the break? Let's just take a look at after.
okay, that would be great. Sheesh. And then my brain, I just lost it. What did you say uwa means again? In the uaha?
Yeah. So usually uwa, if you've got uwa, that means this is a zero conjugation verb. So every verb has a conjugation type or class. We call it, we say either way, class or type. That means we have zero verbs, na verbs, ga verbs, and qa verbs. But we're going to start focusing on that because that's going to tell us how to put it into the perfective or the future. There's a whole bunch of stuff we got to remember. And so we'll see. Sometimes you've got zero and everything else, and then other times you got zero and na, and then ga and qa, right? So usually, sometimes zero and na are together. Ga is its own thing. Qa is its own thing. Kind of depends on how we're talking about the verb. But as far as starting to be able to put this into the perfective, these are things we'll have to just kind of remember.
Cheese.
Okay. Let's jump back into these.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
you had said that if it wasn't ua, it would be woo. So what conjugation type is woo?
All the non-zeros. So all the na,
Oh,
ga, and the qa. So that's a case where you've got zero and everything else, which is a kind of a common repeating pattern through Lingít. So then you'd have, so you could have something like wu ta, slept. But then you would have uwasa, named it, right? Or uwaha, like this or something. Good question.
Another question. I was writing, and I don't know if you missed explaining, but itwu yanik, is that, did you, I think I heard you talk about it a little bit. Are you missing the ge there, or you're saying that, or is the yanik age the completion of that? Oh, okay.
I'd probably put it right there, yeah. I put a question mark, but I didn't put the ge marker. Sheesh. Thanks for pointing that out. But this, it's very common too, very, very common when people start speaking Lingít that they'll, so like, here's a phrase, right? So this means like, you want water or you like water. But just because I like, and it goes, hin ituwa segu, right? Hin ituwa segu. But I can't, now I see people do this all the time, and I probably do it all the time as well. I'll go, hin ituwa segu, right? So I'm pushing English sound system onto Lingít, where I should be saying, hin ge ituwa segu. This is probably the most common way to say it, where you put it after the object. Like, is it this? Do you want this? Right? And then I've also heard it this way, but I don't think that that's as common, which would be sort of like, is it water that you want? Right? Hinge ituwasagu. Hina tuwagesagu. That, yeah, we'll just keep an eye on it too. Like, we'll see it. The yes or no question is it's not the most common thing in Lingít, but I think it in conversation it comes up a lot. Do you want to eat? Do you want to go there? Do you want water? Do you want to play this game? Do you want to walk down here? There's a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, okay. Let's see. I think we did a bunch of these. Maybe we'll go over these again, just to see them, hear them. We'll probably just do them once or twice until we get up there. So here's some relational bases. So you can put suffixes onto these. You'll see them built into words. Zantikehini, that's where this comes from, is this ke. So I'll say and you repeat. Da. Da. Ka. Ge. Gu. Ke. Ite. Ji. Ke. You're going to see da and ji all over the place. All over the place. Sometimes in some kind of surprising ways. Like I could say, Ye jine ji dach chat wudechwet. I'm tired from working. But it's like, it's really interesting, right? Because it kind of personifies working by saying from its possession. Like it gave it to me. This one you're going to see in a whole bunch of other things too, like chidzi achji, it was difficult for me to do, right? And so sometimes when things come into your possession, or I could say chachet ijiyen qati, I hope you're lucky. So I hope luck comes, actually it's more like let luck come into your possession. Da, you're going to see all over the place. Dot, a da day, and things like that. Out of this whole group, those are the most common that you're going to see. Daka, you'll mostly see that in dakihiti. But it's also in dakanuku. And so you'll see it in some things like that. But that's where it comes from in dakihiti. You will see that one, but mostly like talking about going up against something, or you can also add to in front of it. So you could say whoosh to gate, you has. And so literally saying they're talking against the insides of themselves or each other. It means they're arguing. Whoosh to gate, you has. They're arguing. I don't think gu is very common, but it's in askutu, inside the base of the trees. That's the word for forest. Qay, again, I don't think that's that common, but you'll see it around. Let's see. And then what the da does in a verb is usually saying, like if you're saying like dayaka, that means saying something about something to somebody. And then you say da'ine is to work on something. Those are probably two of the most common ways you'll see da on there. And we can take a look after the break. We can take a look at what you folks are running into. Always here to help. Just like translation work is like very, very challenging. So we've been woo-hooing and we've been a little bit of the touching, and now I'm just throwing you all into the deep side of the pool. It's like, get in there, you know. But not to just do it on your own. Okay. Yeah, I know we did all these. We're just gonna do one version of this. We'll just do niya, shaki, shuyi, shu, shuwu, tayi, yi, tak, khan. So niya, you're gonna see it as niya or yinna or nya. It's in a bunch of place names, like when the name Huna comes from Hunya, the shelter from the north wind. So on its own, a lot of times it means to shield something or to shelter it, but it could also be in the area of something. It's a very interesting word. Like some of these have like tons of meaning kind of packed in there. Like you could say hit shun tu. So there's also quite a few of these that have this kind of missing end consonant that pops up. So sha is a head. So if you close it, like you say into my head, you'd say ach shun tu. So it gets an N on there. So hit shun tu, in the head of the house. That's the upstairs of a building. Hit dayina, or it's usually hit dayina, which comes from the niya, is the downstairs. So hit dayi is down area below, niya in that vicinity. Shaki, this is how you get on top of a mountain, is shaki, shaki, on the head of it. Something on your head, it's also shaki. So it's not cut, it's just shaki is on the top of the head. Keshkatu wa ushku kashashkao, kashakit wujakak. Okay, keshkatu wa ushku. Anybody tell me what that one is? Here, actually, let me write this one. I'll write it right here. So I'll say heshkatu wa ushku. Oops. Kashakit would ushkak. Gotta write it like that. We ha shashka. That's a nice long sentence. Heshkatu wa ushku. Kashakit ushkak. We kashashka. What parts do you folks recognize in that? This is a culturally based sentence, so it's not the easiest one.
So is Ţuwa the negative of Ţuwa
Yeah, so this, like, if you said hesh ach tuwa ushku, I don't want it, I don't like it. If I said hesh it tuwa ushku, you don't want it, you don't like it.
Oh, so one doesn't, a person doesn't?
Yeah, so
Is
using
it
the
people?
fourth, sometimes a fourth person in the negative is like nobody. So that's how you'd say nobody wants, or in this case, I'd probably say people don't, oh my goodness, want. And now we just went over this one, but I put a suffix on there.
So it's arriving at the top.
And then here's the ka again. Put a little separation there. People don't want arriving on top of
People arriving?
People's heads, right? So the head is on top of the head is already built in here. So some of these get wild because they kind of stack in there. So shaki would be anything on someone's head, right? And then this verb would also be wujaqaq. Wujaqaq would be the standard perfective form, but I should say this, because now it's become subordinate to this. So kashakit wujaqaq would be it landed on a person's head. But this is how you'd say, people don't want it to land on people's head. So I'll just change that. This is like for a bird or something to land, or a plane. Now what about this noun? Anybody know that noun? Kashashchal.
Does it have a reflexive in it?
Does that have to do with cutting or sawing or something?
Well, so like here's a person, here's a head, this is a classifier, and this is the verb root, which means to be hairy. So put it together and you have kind of a hairy-headed person. But it's a compound noun for something that has four wings, flies, and I think is one of the few things that's a living creature that could fly backwards, could fly any direction at all.
It's imaginary,
It's real.
4 wings.
Or it has 8, I guess. No, I think it has 4. Do I know what I'm talking about? I don't know if I know what I'm talking about.
Dragonfly?
Yeah.
Ah,
Is that how many wings they have?
I think 4.
Okay, we'll say 4. So this is a cultural thing. It's kind of an odd sentence, but I thought it was shakit. You don't want no dragonfly landing on your head because your hair will fall out later. So just know you have been warned. You've been told. It's a very, I don't know if it has ever happened, but this is what I was told. Like, you don't want that thing landing on your head, your hair will fall out. Okay. So to drift out for that cultural information.
I always see people like saving dragonflies like on the boat. Sometimes they'll like take refuge, and now I got a reason to tell them to send that freeloader along, maybe.
There was a time though where these people were supposed to be watching a village, and they took turns, and like one would take a nap while the other one watched, and then the other and the one was taking a nap, and then the other one accidentally fell asleep, and people were coming up on the village, but a dragonfly landed right here. I woke them up, and they saw him, ran down, warned everybody. So they use it as a crest. That's a Deshitan crest, so especially the folks from Rangoon. Okay, so we've got shuyi, but I should put shu in front of it. This is another one of these ones that I think I'm gonna have to do some more explanation, a little more exploration too. This does mean the end of something, or sometimes the edge of it. Dzéiwsh, the end of the trail. A whole bunch of places called Dzéiwsh, including what some people call Haines, Alaska, whoever that person is. Dzéiwsh, end of the trail. But there's a bit more to this one. This is one, there's a few of these I'll say, like, just keep an eye out for this one, because you're going to see it's got a, like, if you put w on it as a suffix, now it's half of it, and I don't know why. If you put the letter T at the end of it, shoot, it means to arrive at the end of it, but there's some verbs that say like shoot out the uck, they built a fire, which is maybe they built the fire using the ends of it. And if you say ach shu day, like Raven did, the elders I was working with, or that, yeah, they translated that as come and get me. So I don't, it's really interesting. You'll see it. It does also mean the end. Like this can be built right into a lot of verbs, means for something to die off or to get killed off or to run out of something. But just keep an eye. This is one where it's like you'll see it. It's one of those ones that's like holding the matrix together, where you'll just start seeing it all over the place, including here, shuyi, below the end of it. This is what that literally would mean. So yi is below, ta yi is underneath. Just kind of remember those. And then di yi is down below. Right? So these are, some of these are going to be very closely related, and you might have to just sort of keep an eye out for them and keep referencing back to the dictionary to look up which ones you're looking at. Should
So
ye,
you're gonna call the part about what?
so w is, this is the same w as in like gusu, yadu, wedu, nechu, to be at somewhere. But when you
So
put
is
that,
this not the same what that would be attached to shawu, like for something about women? So I'm Yanwa Shah, and I got an anchor tattoo, and I had the phrase or the word Yanwa Shah written in it. And when my great grandpa saw it, he didn't like it, and all he said is, "It should be Shawu." That's all he said to me about it.
so that one, I think, for some of them, like, uh, there might be an instance, like if you're going to say, I don't know who would say this, but if they said, those are my women, then you might end up saying shawu. So this could be the case of the possessive, because remember the possessive could be a WU, and some words have a hidden rounded ending. Like for example, a person would be ka, but if that became like my man, that would be ach ka wu. And it kind of violates, like we see that ending, we say that should be yi at the end. But there's this hidden rounded ending, and there's a whole bunch of them. Like when you have a lake and it turns into a little lake, you get ah. So this W just pops up at the end. So that is another thing that happens. You just got to sort of remember which ones do that, because there's not very many that do, but that could be. And the Yenwa Shah, I've always heard it as Shah, but there could be a case where it's Shah.
Renee,
Ah.
that hidden rounded ending, is that something that might have been pronounced in the past but has dropped off?
Yeah, it would make sense that it was maybe that gamma sound, that Y with the two dots over it. Because, yeah, some of them, and then there's some of them that give these hints as well, like Gao. That one is, when I was working with some speakers in Tessin, they were saying Gam, and other speakers were saying Gang with that nasal sound at the end. Then we asked them to say, how do you say my drum? They gave us 3 different answers. So it's like, okay, let's just move on, because now we're all confused. Because yeah, dialect will affect some of these things. And then some of them, like as far as my recommendations for strategies for learning this stuff, you have these lists of things that you're trying to memorize. So we look at them, we'll go into the stories and start looking for them specifically, but then we'll also have some conversations about the logic behind the whole thing. And I think you gotta do a little of each. When you're getting exhausted from one, like part of it is just sort of keeping this list out and just looking for them in the stories and memorizing them through drills. But then sometimes you're thinking about the structure of it all, which can get wild. So sh is one of those. Tayi is underneath. Yi is below. So those are different, right? So below would be like one thing's here, one thing's like, let's say this is a platform and somebody's on the platform and then there's a sloping hill this way. This would be yi. But if there's a platform and someone was standing underneath it, that would be tayi. So they're just slightly different, right? Again, under the table would be like you're sitting underneath the table. But if there's a table and you're sitting on the floor next to it, that could be yi, like down below. Talk is like, I think we went over this, the bottom of a cavity, submerged in a body of water. Just watch for this one as well. Like it's most commonly used to refer to water, but it could be like if you had these two, like here's the Grand Canyon, and we went down into the Grand Canyon, that would be talk, down into the canyon, because it's a whole thing's a big cavity. There are a couple things that have cavities that you wouldn't expect. Like there's some kind of cavern there. You say Łukaháa is, or Łukaháa is pupil of the eye. So Łukaháa is it, for me, Łukaháa means it has a cavity. And you also have Gánaíocht, which is in the fire. So I think the fire also has a cavity. Chun is next to, most commonly living things, but I've seen it used for non-living things as well. This also, would mean to, next to, or visiting, being by, right? So this works for like, I'm gonna go visit my auntie. So that's, or I'll say, come visit me. Come be by me. So that's how you say like being next to, but also being generally with. Okay, a few more and then we'll take a break. Ask questions if you don't. So here's a couple that sound very, there's four of them that sound very similar, right? So to be beside something, talk,
Up,
talk.
up.
Like this is where the name for tuk dane ton comes from. Tuk dane hit ton. The hit gets contracted out and tuk goes short. This also you can say aqi. So you can have a possessive form of that, and that means my siblings or my relatives of the same clan who are about my same generation. This one is different because it's got a high tone and no underline. Talk,
Up,
talk.
up.
So this situates stuff again to the ocean. This means behind it, but also upland from it. So the name of this little lake right over here is Ak, the little lake. Ak, Ak Sit is the name of the Mendenhall Glacier. The glacier upland from the little lake. A. E.
E.
So this is behind. So especially like behind a desk or it's behind something. It can work for a person, but you can also say dich, which is like at the back of. So it kind of depends. The name Sitka contains this word, eka,
Ika,
eka.
ika.
I think this usually refers to on the coastal side of something. So if you had an island, and then one side of the island faces, like say, like Douglas Island. If you were on the Eka side of Douglas Island, you're on the side that faces the open ocean. But it could, in other instances, be on the outskirts, way outside. Wakshiyi.
Yakshiyi.
So this means in front of someone's vision where they could see it. If you say ka wakshiyi, you're saying in front of the people, where the people could see it. That does get important in Tlingit culture because, like, let's say your clan is having a ku'ik and you guys are planning how things are going. Behind the wall screen, there might be some arguments about what's going on, and people might not be agreeing. But once you get out, when you come out in front of the people, you're entertaining them. So you want to, even if there was some big disagreement about what was supposed to happen, you keep your cool in front of the people. Tuh, yik,
Yep,
one.
one.
So tuh, we've done it. So it's inside. You're going to see this one. Here's another one you'll see all over the place. G, tuh, da. You're going to see them all over the place. In verbs, outside of verbs, right? Yik, you'll also see this one has a lot to do with bodies of water or shallow containers. There's some huge logic behind this one with yik, and also inside of a person. One is the edge of something, like especially if you're talking about like jiwan, that's the edge of your hand. I think ka jiwan su could be like a karate chop because you're gonna chop it with the edge of your hand. But one, here's another sort of one where it's like there's some of these that they depend on where you're at. Heen one is the riverbank. When you're talking about being coming from the river, like they'll say Heen one de huatok. That's a Tlingit phrase. Like Tlingit has a whole bunch of these phrases that are like culturally loaded phrases. The way that one was explained to us in Ţukháin is Joe Hodge told it to us, and he was saying it's a Tlingit phrase. You say Heen one de huatok. I've already started biting on the riverbank. He said that's what the elders would say when they felt like their time to go was coming. Because it references a salmon before it releases its eggs into the water, it'll start biting the riverbanks. Because what they told us is that it's encoding the location for their babies. So it's like doing something with that, the physical part of the riverbank. But so then when a person uses that phrase, it means like my time is coming. You know, and so they would say this when they say, I really got some things I want to share. And so it's a culturally heavy phrase. Okay.
Could you write that in the chat, by any chance?
Yeah, here. I'll put it in the chat. Day one. So that the day right in front of the verb means it's already begun to happen. Right? So let's say you folks invited me over for dinner. How nice. But then I'm late, and I come in and you might say, Ţukaháa, we already ate. We already ate. And, you know, you could say it. But then you give me a plate because it's still being nice. Okay, I think I got two more. So then here's some things you're going to see in place names, some common relational nouns. So dot, I think it's just da with the letter T on it. So it's already closed up with a suffix. But this you're going to see all over the place, about or concerning. It's none of your business. I was talking about you. Many stories exist about Raven. There's this other one, een, teen, and tin. I do think there's a little bit, I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I see in some of the notes that people have made that een is usually used with humans and teen or tin is usually used with non-humans. I think that's probably the case in really old classical Lingít. There's a whole bunch of things in Lingít where over time the rules have gotten a little blurred. That might be what happened. I do think there's also this other thing where if the word behind it ends with a consonant, you usually get een. If it ends with a vowel, you usually get teen. And then there's this interesting thing with the CH and the SH, where the SH is almost considered a vowel. Because you say wooch een, whoosh tin. Those are saying the same thing. Ḳukaháa, you'll see that one now and then. It looks like it's something, or it's resembling, or it's a copy of something. Ḳukaháa is the people of a territory. And Ḳukaháa is really like the ancestral people of a place. So when you talk about the Ḳukaháa for this area, Ak, you're talking about Yaxtetan and Wushkitan. Nak is to leave something behind. Seye is in the tree or in the shelter of something or in the shadow of something. Especially like you say, I'm going to sit under this tree because it's raining. This is the one you would use. You could use seye or jiseye. As jiseye kukwakut. I'm going to walk under that to the shelter of that tree. And then what is the mouth of a body of water? So I guess I should have put this one on there too. Is Shak is the head of the water. So if Heen Shak is the head of the river, Heen Wat is the mouth. So Heen Shak is where the river begins. Heen Wat is where the river ends. Okay. Any questions?
What's the difference between kaya and uwa?
Yeah, I think kaya is it's like it, and uwa or uwaya is it looks like it. Okay. Again, we've done these ones. Dach, the TX. Rarely will it be just the letter X. I'll show you some examples. From, day is towards, Qa is going after, Nach is going through or along. The letter T is arriving at or moving about at, which I think is, I'll have to change that to number 2. And then the underline X is repeatedly arriving at or moving around at. Okay, we're ready for our break. Unless anybody has any other questions, we'll come back and we'll sort of see what you might have in terms of questions with your translations, anything we might sort of take a look at. And then we'll talk about like tactics on how to find stuff when you're stuck, because you will get stuck every now and then, which is no problem. It's what you're supposed to be doing. You gotta take the boat out in the water, bang around on the rocks a little bit. Okay, let's see. Come back in 5 minutes, folks. Sheesh. Okay, good as sheesh. Almost forgot to hit that button. So let's talk about your translation projects. You should all have a story picked out by now. Step 1, retype it 1 sentence per cell. Then the translation, which is, the translation work is the heavy lifting. I think the typing is challenging, kind of looking at 2 things, but that's the light work. And then, you know, it's sort of like someone gives you a job, like, hey, could you do this job? And you're like, oh yeah, it's an easy job. Then all of a sudden you get to this main part of it, and you're like, this is not an easy job. So, but there's so much stuff we learn from this process, and we'll do this stuff all together as well. So, anybody have anything that you want to talk about, ask about in your translation work?
Well,
Well, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna go back to my comment. So I don't know if it came across, but in front of, I just looked again, many of the verbs, it has da. So is a thing. Is that some kind of a thing that goes before a verb? Da.
Yeah, so like whenever we get to our list of pronouns, right? So this is another thing with all of these things, right? So in English, there's a couple things that are really different. One is it comes before the noun. The other is you usually use object pronouns, right? Around me, around you, around them. It just, you could tell which kind of pronoun it is. But the thing with like learning another language is like, you don't always have to analyze the pronouns. You just kind of figure it out. But then once you learn a second language, it's like, okay, that's the type of pronoun this language uses. But for Lingít, we use possessive pronouns when it comes to these direction location terms. So for example, you'll say my around, ach da, there around, do da, right? So it's going to be that one, ach I du, ha ye hastu. The third person possessive pronoun is So for example, technically, you should be using du for humans and for non-humans. If it's your dog, your cat, or your pet rabbit, whatever, you can use du.
It's a non-human, so okay.
It's. So even though it's, I would always translate as da, as around it or about it. Or, and it's usually a non-human thing. And it could be non-living too.
Punashish, that's very helpful.
Okay. And when you looked in the old dictionaries used to always have a da, a nak. So it always have listed first. But then what we found is students would keep the there. So they'd say stuff like, ach, a da. You're like, whoa, 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 you gotta, that and the are on the same wheel. Good question.
So that's just two low tone A's, correct?
Yep. That one should be low all the time.
So I've noticed that there's a different, I don't know what the word is. It seems like it's orthography between this text and a lot of the resources. So I think some of that clicked for me today with just there's a little bit of translation from not just from the text to English, but from the text to a different orthography in the resources, which was kind of a little bit of a crazy maker for me to figure that out. But if anybody hasn't gotten to that point yet, just FYI, you're gonna have to do that, which sometimes it's like the length of the vowels or spellings sometimes are different, and that is a little bit of a puzzle there. But there are some things that just aren't in some of these resources, words that just are nowhere to be found. How then do I proceed with those?
That's a really good question. Yeah. You could bring them into here when we're meeting together. You could send them to me, and hopefully we could solve it, right? And I want to highlight some of the things that you're talking about. Like the verb dictionary is a really good example, right? So there's a whole bunch of things as we go through here. It's like, okay, hun, daka, hiti. They'll usually write suffixes, always write them long. Nowadays we write them short, but I think a lot of people say them long anyways. For these, sometimes they're going to attach a suffix using a hyphen. So we would just write yuch as one word right there. Just get rid of the hyphen. The rest here is all pretty, this would all be written the same way. If you go down here, Ḳukaháa, this would be a short vowel. So the other thing is they tended to lengthen some of the vowels. It was just something that happened. The other thing, if you see this downward marker here, we don't write that. That's just marking a long, low vowel, which we just leave it as just two vowels put together. Shtuqa, again, we'd just get rid of the hyphen. That's the only thing that would change with that. Wudacha, that would stay the same. That one would stay the same. Duh, that one we would write short. Ishi, we'd probably write that one short as well, which is don't. Let's see, the rest looks, there's another downward one where we would just write the two A's. This one should be short. Yeah, so there's some stuff like that you're going to run into in terms of how this stuff works. It shouldn't affect the meaning too hard unless you're sort of doing a direct word search for something. And then I see utakujin in the text. So I'm going to go back to this slideshow and I'm going to write this word out so we can kind of start to see how it works. Let's see. How was it? Oops, not that one. Okay. So the word here there'll probably come a day. It's like the things that I could talk about is like we used to use the Orange Dictionary so hard. And I think when you folks are talking to the future generations of learners, you'll probably say, we didn't have these little baby stories. We had to translate big stories because we'll probably have like very simplified stories. But I think these are great stories to look at because they show us some verbs that maybe we need to start bringing back to use again. So as far as starting to identify the parts, like, so one is I will say, this is a verb. This is a verb. And as we sort of spot that it's a verb, what I'll usually look for is like, do I see a classifier? And does anybody see a classifier in here? That's going to help us a lot.
That W.
Yeah.
Duh. Right, so I'll just copy this, I'll redo it, and now I'll say, okay, well, this is something, that is something. There's a root marker.
Mhm.
And what you might not have seen this type of thing before. So I'm going to walk you through what you're looking at right here. So what you have here is you have multiple suffixes on this verb. And it gets a little tricky to figure out how to spot this stuff. But when you see this sort of ending, I'm going to show you what this is. This is a CH followed by what I would write nowadays as an IN. Okay? So now let me tell you what these suffixes do. Because we haven't even done verb suffixes yet. So asking you to do this translation work is going to push us up against some things that we haven't seen before. So, future generations will get the easy stories, but you guys are too smart for the easy stories. So what we have is this CH. When this pops up on the end of a verb, does anybody have any theory or thought on what that might do?
That's the
So repetition.
Yeah, so this is what we call a habitual thing, like it happens all the time. The CH, it happens all the time, happens all the time. So that's what that one does. So we're gonna go, so let me copy this again. And now I'm gonna change this to, I'll just say habitual, right? Happens on a regular basis. It's predictable. This IN is the same one, like you folks have seen this before. And I'm going to show you down here where you have seen it. So you could say you do a sock right? So somebody translate that for me. You do a sock, right? There's got to be a name right here.
Name is called.
Right? Is called, right? And what, so there's something that happens here. If I go name, you, oops, do, saw, gun. Okay?
Used to, but is no more.
Used to, but is no more.
So the gene would be habitual, but not anymore.
Yes. So what happens here is it went from wa to duh because the classifier changed from ya to 0. So the ya means happened or is or it did happen. The 0 means didn't happen or is not happening. And then you've got KW plus UN. This is the same. It'll be UN or IN, depending on the ending of that verb root. Okay? So then we've got, we call it decessive. It just means used to, but not anymore. So now this gets us to looking for the who. So now we've got something to go into the dictionary. Sometimes we've got to sort of start teasing this thing apart before we go look at it. The oo part is related to the ch part. So if you say, you could say utahooch. People are regularly, or they are regularly doing this who verb. Does anybody know what who is as a noun?
Is it chest?
It's not a chest. It's woo.
Oh.
Very good prediction. What about yuka ut who? Anybody ever hear that?
Mm.
It's a blanket. Okay, so who is a blanket? But let's
Oh,
dip into the verb dictionary. And we're going to go look for who and see what comes up. And we're looking for the DA classifier. It might be DI in this. I can't remember. So we go to X apostrophe, and we get, if we go look around, there's no XOOW. There is an XOO, which is what this verb is. I think the W can be there, but it doesn't have to be there. We have, because we wear these things a certain way, this is to pin a blanket on just like you would wear a button blanket. So we're going to go look up this wear verb and just see what's there. So we'll go to the English section and we'll go to W. We're going to go to wear. So we've got Dzéiwsh, and we've got Ţukaháa, Dzéiwsh. I would say people. People wear deer blankets all the time. Let's put on blankets. It's so cold. It's actually, I would say, it's too cold. Can contract to. So, if we go back to, so this means to wear a blanket, and we go back to this, gene. How would you now translate that?
They used to wear blankets all the time, but they don't anymore.
Yes, or you say they used to always wear blankets. It's not a very common verb today, but I feel like it's something that we might want to sort of think about, maybe start bringing back to use, because we do wear blankets. Anything else?
That one kind of burst my head open.
And so that's why I'm totally fine if we do this stuff together. I'm also, no matter what you get, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Don't ever feel bad about doing this type of work. Stepping from sort of like small sentence construction to like translating big whole stories is big steps. But what you'll find is you'll get some spots like, okay, there it is. Got it. Right? Du'uchun is people wore blankets.
Can I share my screen just because it's one of those things where I was like, I think I found the word, but it doesn't make sense with the sentence. Like, oh boy, this one, the bolded one. I found kashir praise, but he's fleeing from it. Praise at some point. He sees the gun through the face of it, tripped over it. I was like, okay, I don't think that's the word.
So with kashik, so there's a couple, so like it's very rare to have a two-syllable verb root. There's very few of them. Kudzi, Ishan, like there's a couple of them. Nigwat, but usually there's some kind of noun or something built in there, or something that ties to a bigger phrase. So if I see, so we'll do this again. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna copy this, and what I'll do after class is I'll make a separate slideshow of just these notes that I'm taking, because sometimes I'll take notes like this and then I end up just forgetting to do something with it, and you gotta comb through some YouTube video. So I think this was this. Is that correct? Okay, so if I'm looking at this one, and I want to start just sort of, I say, okay, there's a ka on there. I see the ka, right? So that's the horizontal surface. Most of the time, it's this horizontal surface, right? It's related to that to be on something, a ka. If I see shi, I don't know of any prefix that is shi, but I know there's a shi classifier. So once I see that, I'm thinking, okay, there is the classifier. That means I have this root and this ending. This ending is another repetitive suffix. You'll see sometimes there's just certain verbs that just like to have that K on there. And we'll talk about that in a second. But now, once I would predict this to be the root. That means I'm going to go into the dictionary looking for the long version. And I'm going to give you a little pro tip. If it ends with an apostrophe, there probably will never be a low version of it. So when a lot of things I'll say, find the verb root, go look it up long and low, but this one shouldn't have a low version, but they might mark it in the verb dictionary as long and low. So we're going to go look for Eve, and then we'll start digging around and see what we can find. So we go into the verb dictionary, go down to the underline X apostrophe, and there's an SH classifier right there, to slip or to slide. But we want one with ka.
Sorry, Renee, I don't see the dictionary you're looking at.
There's some weird thing going on. Let me stop it. Let me try it again. And also when I shared my screen, everybody's pictures disappeared.
I want to say goodness cheese for reminding me about the long low, because I was not doing that for verbs. I was looking for them as they were written there. So that's, yeah, goodness cheese.
So we build up with a lot of stuff. Like the way I generally teach Lingít is like there's a whole bunch of stuff with verbs. So sometimes I'm like, yeah, those verbs are over there in the next room, but we got to do a whole bunch of this stuff, and then we're gonna go into that room. Every now and then we'll kind of peek in there. We're almost ready to just go into that room, folks, because we have learned about almost everything that's not a verb. Not like you now you know all of the things on those lists, but you know what those lists are. So then you'll start saying, okay, maybe this is one of those kinds of things. Maybe this is one of those kinds of things. And then as you're sort of doing this translation work, you're also thinking about, I can learn how to use these things when I put the language together. So when we look at ka, sh, it, we're looking for it. If we got shit, we're very close. Match the classifier, match the root. It did have ka on it. So we see one that's transitive, that means there's an object and a subject, to iron clothes. But if you, in the context of the story, you'd be like, why would this guy, he's ironing clothes? It doesn't make sense. So maybe we go down to the one with just the object, to be slippery, oil, ice, wet rocks, etc. This is how you talk about the roads are icy, be careful. That path is slippery from the mud, watch out. Right, so this, we're gonna go look up slippery and see what we find. So we'll scroll down to the eyes. So here, this is actually that same verb, even though there's this little W popping up. I usually don't hear it, but they wrote it down this way. I think these days we write it without that W. But here we've got Nadak Kawachit, but there's no SH there, right? For a smooth, polished surface to be slippery. Of course, Lingít has categories, like what kind of slippery? Is it because it's smooth, or is it because it's wet and icy or oily? Right? So with the wet, icy, or oily, we get we each ka kashchit. Those rocks are slippery. It's actually sort of referring, we look at that each, it's talking about the reef or the submerged sort of, a very large rock that the tide moves up and down on. That's what that really comes down to. And then we have ka. There's one of those, right? We just start keeping an eye out for these things. Kashachit. Those rocks are slippery. So we go back, and it was probably referring to something being slippery. Okay. There is a verb. You could say kaushachik would be I slid. And that could be I slipped and fell, but it could also be I was sledding.
So he's fleeing, slippery at some point. So do Anayi, teen, that is his gun. That's that one where the A gets switched. He sees his gun, because that comes up a couple times. Do Unai, teen.
If you'd say unai, you'd expect our teen if he sees it. But if it's unai teen with his gun. Now it's the
With his gun, okay. That makes a big difference. Dzéiwsh.
let's see, a list of verbs. Okay, let me introduce you folks to the Verbal Structure Handbook. Oh, you guys are stepping up today. So this was made by Dzéiwsh, James Crippen. We may have looked at it in here before. I'll show you folks where you could find this, and I'll also put a link up to it for our class tonight when I get to, I'm a couple days behind on uploading videos, but I'll be uploading tonight. So the whole idea of this is really centered on verbs. And it's really sort of, as you flip through this book, it's like the stuff you might encounter before the verb, then the stuff you might encounter after the verb. So if you want to start looking at verbal suffixes, this would be a really good spot. So this is a very condensed handbook. It does not list a bunch of stuff that shows you gives you long explanations of what this stuff is. This is like your Lingít field guide. Because now you folks are going out on the boat, you're going out in the woods, you're going out, but you're not by yourself, but you are going out on these adventures now. So as you go through, there's some information about Lingít. Like here's some information about dialect. Here's some information about how Lingít is related to other languages. Here's some information on how some of the vowels are different in between the dialects. Here's the Lingít consonants, here's the vowels. This shows you your cheat sheet as well for moving in between orthographies from the YNLC and the coastal orthography. This talks about Tongass vowels, how they're a little different. These are types of, this is falling vowels, which does exist for Southern Tlingit speakers. This talks about types of nouns, which, we've talked about this, but not in such sort of technical ways. But there's nouns that need to belong to something. There's nouns that can't be owned. There's nouns that can be owned. Then there's nouns that must be owned. And then there's nouns that they get a possessive suffix if they get owned. Right? That's what that sort of thing is documented. Here's a sort of basic version of how to add a possessive suffix. Here's the suffixes that could go onto a noun.
A name,
Oh,
a little bigger.
oh yeah, sorry. Let me actually, let me do a couple things here. Let me make this bigger on my screen. Let me get rid of the sidebar. Let me zoom in. Okay. So this isn't just suffixes though. This also includes some relational nouns. Qut is without. So that, there's a couple logical things as well. Teen is with, but you wouldn't say tesh teen, you'd say qut. So sometimes in Tlingit there's an opposite word for the thing, where in English you would say something and then not something. Let's see. Then here's some directional things like listed in tables. So these are what I would call these sort of universal sense, location and direction terms, right? So I call them independent bases. Upstream, downstream, to the shore, down to the shore, ashore, out to sea. So it's a very condensed charts of all of this stuff. But if you're doing translation work, you want to look this stuff up quickly, you can jump right into here. This is a whole big list of relational nouns. So we looked at some. This is getting into a complete list. There are lots of them. As we go through, let's see. So this starts to talk about like what happens to these when we put suffixes on them. Don't worry about that right now. These are adjectives. We're going to look at adjectives probably next semester. I don't think I want to mess with adjectives and adverbs yet since we're doing all this translation work. What I'll do though, if you're interested, I'll put a list of adjectives and adverbs. I've got this sort of consolidated list of ones I think are very common. So then we get into a list of pronouns, object pronouns, subject pronouns, possessive pronouns, independent, and they're all these ones that we call postpositional, which is the empty base, which is really the possessive plus the empty base. Oh, let me make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. Okay. Let's see. These are the parts that you might see something in a verb. So sort of giving it a number and a sign. I use a lot of visuals when I start talking about the parts that are in a verb. This is a pretty technical analysis of what kinds of things are there. But here's ka, here's ya, here's a classifier, here's the subject, here's the object. A lot of this stuff is going to be more than you needed to know. So we're going to sort of gloss through it pretty quickly. This one gives you a list of things that you might see there. Panay, starting to put, lost, hin, into the water. You and ye, we've seen those. You do a sock, ye do a sock, whoosh, hus. So like, if you're ready to sort of melt your brain over the break, this is a really good way to do it. Lots of stuff. We're not going to go over very much of this stuff, but we do start getting into suffixes here and post verbs. So we'll talk about some of those things. Then we get into these lists of them. If you encounter them, you can look them up here, right? So you could see some of these things. Yan, yach, yende, completing, finishing. Tok, dak, by mistake, wrongly. Returning, reversing, so on and so forth. Let's see. This shows some of these ones that do. Some of them, like when we start talking about yun, like yun uwane, one of the things that you'll learn is that some of them, when you put them into the future, you're going to put day in front of it. So I might say, yande khatkakwane, I will be ready. So it's going to get yande. Here's a bunch of stuff. These are nouns that can be attached onto verbs. Some of these aren't very common. Like I would say this whole list is probably not very common. These ones are much more common. So here's j, a hand, sh, the head, k, the nose or the point.
That's not what we're looking at.
What are you guys looking at?
We're looking at home and
Why you gotta do me wrong, Zoom?
okay.
Okay,
Gee,
so I don't know what you guys were looking at. It looks different on my end, so. So these are the more common, I call them thematic prefixes. They are nouns that can be put onto a verb. So there's a whole bunch of things you'll see in here, like the head, the end. Here's that sh we talked about, the voice or the neck, hair, the bottom. Okay. So then we start getting into some pretty complicated charts. Don't worry about these ones. This is talking about suffixes and stem variation and stuff. You're going to get up to here, but I wouldn't worry too much about here. Am I frozen? You guys look frozen to me. I don't know what's going on with this stuff. Okay, we're going to pass. What's that?
It's freezing a little by end, but I don't know if it's because of the internet or.
I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good. You guys sound like robots to me, so I don't know.
now your video was frozen.
Okay. So the phrase that we've been using for your screen froze is we'll say, eutlitik, you froze, eutlitik. And it's kind of putting some stuff like, you wouldn't really say this to someone in the pre-Zoom and internet days because you would be saying, you are literally frozen, you're like a block of ice now, which means hooch, right? But we've been using that eutlitik for like you froze on Zoom because like it happens. It seems to be happening more both in this room and in that room. And it seems to happen after 7 o'clock. I'll talk to the IT folks and see, like, are they trying to give me a cutoff time? I don't. For the Monday, Wednesday class, it kind of makes sense because we end at 7. So I'm trying to drag the class on and all of a sudden the internet starts freezing. I was like, okay, well, I guess we're done. So, but for this class, like we can't afford to be freezing at 7:20, 7:10, maybe 7:30. I'll ask them to turn on the freezing internet at 7:30. I don't know. Who knows what's happening? But anyways, sorry. that document has a lot of super valuable information. And I think you're going to use it. I can't see you guys move, so I don't know if I should keep talking. Ah, yes. Using it as you learn it. Perfect. Except horrible. Guess we're done. Send me questions if you guys got them. I'm happy to sort of work through stuff. I'm gonna start going through all of these stories and translating them myself so that we have them ready. There's only a translation for one of them that I know of. So these were done decades ago. They're fabulous little short stories. I'm so glad that we're doing this work. This is tricky stuff, so don't worry, because learning how to spot verbs, spot the root, spot the classifier, see what other parts are there, then going in to look it up, like that's a really big step. But if you could do this, as you learn how to do this, you're unlocking a ton of stuff. All this Lingít that's been written. I don't know what's going on now. Ishan Khat. Yeah, here. Last phrase of the night. Jurdinak. I give up. But you shouldn't. Don't follow my example. But it's a pretty good, like, I'm quit working on it. Not literally, just for now. Cheese, thanks for sticking with it while I went through.
Cheese.
Yeah, okay. See you folks in a week. Don't come on Thursday.
Cheese.
Unless you bring food.
There'll be no food here, just be darkness. Cheese.
Sheesh.
Ah.
Sheesh.
Ďéiwsh.
Something I think I'm going to start doing is, you share sometimes a lot of so many of these really important kind of keystone cultural phrases, is to try to put those all in one place, because they seem like really good jumping off points to kind of explore the language, but also so much more.
Yeah, we talked about like doing that. There's some of them in the stories where they're really like, if you just looked at the phrase, it's like, I'll just go along as a bailer. But like it's got a ton of cultural significance, because that's what Duktuk, the strongman, said when he got in that boat. He's like, I'll just go along as a bailer. Hoocha. Sorry. We'll talk about it next week.
Hooch. Sheesh.
Ah.